We're taking your mess and making it your message. Discovering your post-service identity. Today we're doing this with best-selling author and Purple Heart recipient Sean Parnell. Guys, welcome to the Military Wire with Mike Schindler. This is the podcast where we interview America's most elite men and women who have served this country. We share their stories of overcoming, their proven lessons in leadership, and their journey to finding mission and purpose. And before I get into introducing Sean and pulling him into the show, guys, I just want to say straight up that we all know life can be messy. Gary, my production guy, is looking at me and say it's messy every time we do one of these because I keep changing the intro. But I think if we got serious about this topic between family, jobs, finances, there are so many battlefronts that require our attention, that tap our energies, our resources, and seriously, if we're not careful, we can lose sight of our dreams and fall victim to our circumstances. And then you throw in military service and combat tours. I mean, life can be messy. I think all of us know somebody who's served multiple tours, combat tours, and after the first experience, one comes back a little changed. And after multiple tours, there are internal battles that compete with the external ones. And sometimes our messes become even bigger. But I just want to say there is light to all of this, and there are ways to navigate to better days. And our guest today, New York best-selling author and Purple Heart recipient Sean Parnell, is going to help us unpack this subject. He is somebody that took his mess and made it part of his message, and he's going to share how all of you who are listening can do the same. Sean, welcome back to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Mike. It's really great to be back. I love the show, and it's great to be a part of it.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you're back. And we kind of shared, we talked about this a little offline, so I don't want to keep people in the dark on this, but you are becoming such a prolific writer, not only recognized in the military circles as a great writer, but throughout the industry. New York best-selling author, featured on CNN, Fox News. You've got another book that's coming out here in September 2019, All Out War, which I have read the majority of it. So don't share the ending. Don't share anything about this book. I mean, you can share a little bit, but this book is amazing. But I know it was a journey getting here for you. So for those of you, I want you to share your story because some people don't know your story. So would you kind of share with us, the unit you were a part of and what happened that resulted in you getting your Purple Heart?
Yeah, of course. Well, I was a young lieutenant in the 10th Mountain Division. I was in Bravo Company, 2nd Battalion, 87th Infantry Regiment, and this was back in 2005 is when I processed, and I got assigned to an infantry platoon. We knew we were going to Afghanistan back in 2005, but that's really all we knew. And if you think back to that time, and what dominated the news cycle was the fact that, America was in Iraq dealing with an insurgency that was growing out of control. Every single night you heard of a new soldier tragically being killed from an IED, and all the headline news every night was the surge.
Yep.
So, man, at the time, Afghanistan was just a stability and support operation. We weren't really getting any intelligence from the front lines or from our unit that we were replacing in Afghanistan at all. And I'll tell you, when we got there in 2006, we really just got thrown into a meat grinder. A renewed insurgency. The enemy had consolidated and reorganized in Pakistan and came at us hard in 2006. And my unit, my platoon, was there on the front lines for not just a year, but 485 days of just absolute hell of close combat every single day, day in and day out, to where 85% of my platoon was wounded. My base took over 3,000 or 4,000 rockets, indirect fire attacks throughout that year. I mean, every single day we were getting hit, and that's what I had to live through. I myself also was wounded in the process. Fractured my skull in a couple different places and was wounded on June 10th, 2006. So, yeah, we had a really rough time over there for sure.
Yeah, I remember that time that my best buddy was deployed over there. During that time, he was working with the officer in charge of all the medical facilities over there. And it was that year, 2006, that prompted me to write my first book because of the op-tempo you're talking about between Iraq and Afghanistan. And to your point, Afghanistan was a footnote. And so many guys came back from that era, that time period, really overwhelmed by moral injury. I mean, you guys saw things, did things that most people don't want to know about, that creates these conflicts, demons of the past conflicts. But Sean, you've done something pretty amazing through all this. You've kind of broken these chains, or at least you're working through them. How'd you do that? How did you go from, Purple Heart recipient, soldier, 10th Mountain, to suddenly, writing books? I mean, how'd you do it?
Well, I'll tell you, first let me start in combat. As a leader, I felt and knew going in that should we experience heavy combat, the responsibility of being in the moral compass and the moral heart of my platoon as the leader, 100% on me, And so
yeah.
I made it my business to check in with my men as often as humanly possible after firefights, talk to them about their experience. And really, when it looked like, because look, when you fight an insurgency, it's really tough. I mean, that civilians are involved. That some civilians are helping the enemy. It can be really frustrating. And when you add to that the dynamics of the politics on the base and commanders that maybe shouldn't be in command, and it can be overwhelming. So, there were times in combat where we would see a wounded enemy soldier like on the battlefield, and I had soldiers, and I get it where this comes from. I had soldiers that wanted to kill those enemy soldiers. I would not allow it.
Yeah.
When an enemy has a weapon, they're a threat. It's our duty and responsibility to take them out. But when they don't have a weapon, it becomes our responsibility to treat them. And we never made one single mistake the entire time or did anything that we were ashamed of, other than take the fight to the enemy. So I think that the importance of that factor in a leader's role with regards to preventing moral injuries and being the moral compass of your platoon cannot be overstated. And so I know that I don't lose a wink of sleep over, back here in the States over the conflicts that we had with the enemy. Obviously the things that bother me are the children and the innocents who were caught in the middle and who the enemy made a target of. That stuff bothers me. I think about that stuff every day. But, segue for me when I get back in the States, it's like I languished and I struggled when I first came back too, because it's like you go from and just think of it in the most simple terms. You go from the greatest military force the world has ever known, where you're a warrior in a prestigious unit, leading men in combat with purpose, duty, responsibility, to coming out and having none of that. And so I struggled a lot, man. I really did. And so, I think that struggle was, in service to finding a purpose, something greater than myself. And eventually, I found that purpose in writing. But ultimately, the catalyst behind the writing was helping to bridge that gap of understanding between, the men and women who defend freedom on a day-to-day basis and the people who enjoy it. That's what the whole reason why I wrote Outlaw Platoon, my first nonfiction book, was to capture the legacy of my men on the page and ensure that from generation to generation, their heroic actions on the battlefield were passed down. And I realized what an uphill fight it was to bridge that cultural gap between veterans and civilians. It was just, even a best-selling book was almost not enough. Yeah. So that's where I got the idea of trying to write mainstream fiction stories whose main character embodies those qualities of our men and women on the battlefield. So that's why I do what I do, and so, I really think that serving something greater than myself is what I continue to do. And that's what I tell myself that all the time. I'm still in the fight. I'm still in the mission.
Yeah, I love that. But I think you said something that it resonated not only with me. I was certainly that guy when I got out. I jumped, 14 different jobs, right? I was in search of that.
Yes.
What is it? What am I going to do after being part of, something so amazing and now I'm not? So what am I going to do? So I think what you landed on was really understanding or discovering that post-service identity. And for you, it became writing. I love that. And I love how you came up with Eric Steele. So Eric Steele is your absolute 100% Jason Bourne to the 10th level, in my opinion. But what I also love about him is he's flawed, right? I mean, he's real. He's not a superhero. He's just, he's just amazing. So I want to tap your brain on this because, Sean, I'm not building up. I'm really being honest here that you are an awesome writer. You are able to really tell a story through your characters. How'd you come up with these storylines?
Oh, well, the storylines, what I try to do is I try to think of these books, in terms of like a new term that I sort of made up, faction, right? They're fiction, but they're based in our world. So I take the world as it is, or how I'd like it to be, and I take something that I think is particularly dangerous, or something that could be particularly dangerous if we stayed on a certain path, and I try to build a story around it. The first book, Man of War, was about like the Iranian nuclear deal and how I thought that was very dangerous for American national security and geopolitics in the Middle East, right? That was a core component of the book, and I feel like I tried to write a really fun action thriller around that, right? And so in All Out War, in the next book, what I try to do is look at Israel as it pertains to geopolitics in the Middle East and their alliance with the United States, how they're our greatest ally in the Middle East, but in large part, sometimes that relationship can be pretty tenuous. Yeah. And so I try to look at the tea leaves as it pertains to foreign policy and geopolitics and look at where we're going, right? And so I wrote the book, like one of the things that happens in All Out War is an embassy move. American embassy being moved to Jerusalem in Israel. Well, I wrote and turned in that manuscript before President Trump actually did it, so I'm trying to look. Yes. So I'm trying to just get a sense of where we're going and where the political winds are shifting. And I try to write that in a book, and so people that are into that stuff will read it. But also, again, like I try to write action stories. I want there to be a lot of action. So I also try to, while I'm seizing upon these foreign policy elements that I put in the story, I also try to take 5 action sequences that I think have never been done before and write to them, if that makes sense.
Well, let me just tell you, having read the majority of this book, it is moving. It is so fast paced. You create the visuals that I can see in my mind. Like I'm already thinking, okay, this is a movie. And when this is a movie, I will be one of the first in that theater watching this thing. And I was so impressed by the book, the fact that I was like, how did he do this? I mean, how did you write this 200-page plus book and highlight some of these things that are going on today? So the fact, now you truly are reading the tea leaves, buddy. I mean, I'm
trying, and ultimately, like Eric Steele, what I tried to do with this character is he is made in the image of the men and women who wear uniform for this country, right? Yeah. The dilemmas that he faces, while they're like elevated in the book, right? I draw them out, I distill them. I ratchet things up exponentially in terms of what he faces. But the dilemma the core dilemma and the questions that he asks himself is one of what is the mission worth it? Like, am I in the fight for the right reasons? Yeah. Is my involvement in this mission affecting the people that I love and care about? And in All Out War, look, his mom gets hurt because of his job, right? So how many mothers and fathers in this country get hurt? Maybe not physically, but emotionally because of their son or daughter's job and service to the country. It takes a toll. That's what these books are all about. And Eric Steele finds himself asking these questions all the time. And facing these dilemmas that our men and women face in the battlefield every day. And there has never been a mainstream character that has been written from that perspective. And honestly, this is why I did it. This is why I'm doing it, because I want to draw attention to what our men and women go through every day. And I want to do it in a fun, mainstream, fiction-y type of way, right?
Yeah, well, you're doing a great job of this. I love this book, and I'm just going to say that people need to pick up All Out War for sure. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about American Warrior Initiative. This is your nonprofit. Tell us some of the cool stuff you're doing with this.
Well, so we are so lucky with the American Warrior Initiative to be, we are fully sponsored by a mortgage company, by Fairway Mortgage, and this is just a company that, they're true believers in support of our military, and they fund us completely, all of our overhead. The reason why that's important is it gives us the ability to donate 100% of the proceeds that we raise to veterans, first responders, and their families. And that matters a lot to people who donate to the cause. They want to know where their money's going. And so what we found, I mean, we initially started by giving mortgage-free homes to veterans, and we soon realized that maybe not everybody's ready for a home, right? Or maybe they don't need a home. Maybe they need something else. So we tried to diversify what we give to veterans and their families, whether it's a furnace or new windows, a new car, whatever. Till recently, we started focusing on service dogs. And so for the last couple of years, we partnered with a service dog organization with the express sole purpose of getting service dogs into the hands of veterans who desperately need them. And I'll tell you, Mike, this is important because the wait lists for service dogs are very long. And by the time a veteran finds himself at the top of the list, oftentimes they can't afford the dog anyway. Service dogs are really expensive. So our organization, like, we don't like bureaucracy. We're super flexible with the way that we can give and move, and we move quickly. So we cut the red tape and we get dogs into the hands of vets who need them the most. And we're really, really, really proud of that work. It's hard work, but it's worthwhile. So you want to talk about, you know, untangling the mess of the mess of transition, right? I struggled like crazy when I first got home, but this is just another way where I can stay in the fight. I don't need a title or rank, or I don't need to be a congressman or senator. I don't need to be a captain still in the military to make a difference, right? Find something that matters to you, and the most important thing is serve something greater than yourself, and stay in the fight. Yeah, that's what we try to do.
I love that. I mean, that's a great bit of advice right there. I think, in the transition piece, there is so much focus on, hey, be sure you get those certifications, be sure you get those PMPs, all good stuff, right? Degrees, things like that. But again, in some ways, we're following that same pattern of getting the titles and getting the certifications and trying to build that up. And then when we get out, the uniform's stripped. Right? We don't know who we are, that post-service identity. And I think you're speaking to that, is really find something that drives you, gets you out of bed in the morning, that you can still give back and feel like you're adding value. Is that fair to say? Say it that way?
Well, right. Yeah, absolutely. And, that I would say that the people who didn't serve, because there are so many people that come out of college with a major, they don't really know what the heck they're going to do with their life. And so, but even if you're in the military and you're getting out, I mean, think about it like this. You're trained to shoot, move, and communicate together. And then you go to combat, and then you fight, bleed, and you die together. And then you come home, and everybody goes their separate ways. That experience, just from a collective identity back to shedding the uniform and being an individual again, is going to be monumentally challenging. Just for that reason that I just explained in and of itself, right? So the critical component, the best piece of advice that I could give to people that are transitioning is don't lose sight of why you volunteered to serve during the longest period of war of nation's history. That ultimately is putting others before yourself. The recognition that it's not about you. The transition is hard, it's jarring, it's tough, but it is not personal, right? Nobody owes you anything, and it's not about you. So find ways in everything that you do to put others before yourself, whether it's volunteering for a charity or getting more involved in your church or something that you're passionate, you believe in, that puts others before you. You will feel a sense of satisfaction outside the uniform that you felt when you were in the military. And so, it's not about you.
Yeah, Sean,
that's what veterans have to remember.
Yeah, I love that. It's so good, so important to remember that. Which is not a hard transition to make, right? Because it was always we, never I. But then we get out into corporate, and it becomes I, and trying to figure out how to navigate that piece, and still remember that when we put our eyes on others, it's amazing how the world moves in our direction. So absolutely. Yeah.
Look, a rising tide lifts all ships.
Yeah,
it's very easy in the civilian world to put yourself first, and I don't even mean that in a sinister way. Everyone wants to get paid. Everyone wants to have a good job. Everyone wants to get that promotion. Everyone wants to get accepted into that college. And so to a certain extent, you are your own best advocate, right? Like nobody's going to advocate for you like you. In fact, that's what they say to us in the military. You're your own best S1. Like, of course you have to take care of yourself.
Yep.
But a core component of everything that you do, you have to put others before you. It's not about you. At the end of the day, living a life that is fulfilling is about putting others first. Now, I'm telling you, even if you get that job and you put yourself first your entire life and you're making $3 million a year, every year until the day that you die, not a single person is coming to your funeral because you made $3 million a year for 20 years. That doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is the legacy that you leave, and the only way that you can leave a legacy is putting others first.
Oh, Sean, so good, so good, so good. I love having you on the show. So I want to be sure people get your book, because this All Out War, I don't want to say it's your best book, because I really loved the first book. I loved Outlaw Platoon. I mean, you write so great. So hurry up and write the next one.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, but
I'm working on it now. I'm working on the third book right now. Trying my best,
Well, All Out War is awesome. So how do people get this book?
You can get All Out War anywhere books are sold in all formats. So it's an ebook. There's an awesome audiobook. R.C. Bray reads the audiobook. He brings it to life. Or if you're an old school guy like myself, you can pick up a hardcover anywhere books are sold.
Okay. That is awesome. Sean, great having you on the show. I love having you on the show, and I definitely want you to be a repeat because you always share so much just beyond, the fact that you're a great writer and have served this country so well. The advice that you give is so powerful, and if people would take it, implement it, execute on it, I think they'll see tremendous change in their life. So for those who want to learn more about American Warrior Initiative, go to AmericanWarriorInitiative.com, find out about that organization, support that organization, be part of Sean's great work there. To find Sean's latest book, All Out War, visit Amazon, visit the bookstores, ask for it. You will not be disappointed about that at all. That book will just have you enthralled, hands down. And guys, if you're looking to discover your post-service identity and really get back on a pathway to success, be sure that you reach out to us, and one of our team members will get a hold of you at omfcares.org. Sean, as always, a pleasure having you on the show.
It's always a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having me again.